The media and venture capital sell the spectacle of kinetic war. They show you an armada steaming towards a geopolitical hotspot, a launch-on-warning missile posture. This is a deliberate misdirection. The kinetic cost of engaging a U.S. carrier group is prohibitive. It is a mathematical certainty that a rational adversary will choose a different vector. The real war is not for territory, it is for solvency. The primary asymmetric vector is not a missile, it is silence. RUSI and CSIS analysis confirms the catastrophic vulnerability of the global subsea cable network. Trillions in transactions per day flow through a handful of physical conduits on the ocean floor. Severing these does not require a military budget. It requires a repurposed commercial vessel. The objective is to unplug the Western financial system from the global grid. Simultaneously, a protocol for satellite blinding renders GPS and high-frequency trading data inert. The result is not a military defeat. It is systemic paralysis. This creates the blind Leviathan, a state possessing the world's most formidable military hardware, now rendered deaf, dumb, and blind. An inert giant, incapable of projecting power or processing the financial transactions that sustain its own existence. This is the accelerant for a solvency crisis, the deliberately triggered black swan that central banks admit they cannot model or contain. The adversary's primary calculation is not battlefield victory, but regime survival. A prolonged, high-cost kinetic war is a domestic liability, a catastrophic drain on political capital and treasury reserves. The state itself faces a solvency crisis. CSIS analysis confirms this framework. An unpopular war, funded by a contracting economy, creates a terminal timeline. At a certain point, the kinetic cost becomes secondary to the risk of systemic internal collapse. Their own system fails first. This internal weakness is the direct motive for pivoting to an asymmetric attack vector. Confronting a Western military armada is a zero-sum game they are mathematically guaranteed to lose. The only logical strategy is to refuse to engage on those terms. They don't need to sink the carrier. They only need to trigger a pre-existing vulnerability in the Western financial system. This isn't about creating a black swan event. It's about activating one. Their weakness forces them to leverage our fragility. The pivot to financial warfare is not an act of strength, but a function of desperation. It is a launch-on-warning protocol to preempt their own domestic solvency event. Their survival calculus mandates an attack on our economic center of gravity, not our military assets. The kinetic cost-exchange ratio has inverted. This is the central mathematical reality of modern conflict. Analysts at the Royal United Services Institute, or RUSI, have modeled the core liability. A $5 million main battle tank can be functionally neutralized by a $500 first-person view drone. This is not a battlefield problem. It is a balance sheet problem. The cost asymmetry is a strategic weapon in itself. For every dollar an adversary spends on a disposable kinetic asset, Western military budgets must liquidate $10,000 of advanced hardware. This is an engineered economic drain protocol, designed to exhaust a superpower's treasury, not its ammunition stockpiles. This dynamic is what military planners refer to as the democratization of violence. The capability to project precise, lethal force is no longer the exclusive domain of nation-states. It has been commoditized. The barrier to entry for creating systemic disruption has collapsed from billions of dollars in stealth bombers to the cost of consumer electronics. This economic leverage makes a conventional military response a strategic error. An adversary has no incentive to engage our hardened, expensive military assets in a symmetric fight. The blueprint is now obvious. Use disposable, cheap technology to impose unsustainable costs, forcing a solvency crisis long before a single decisive battle is ever fought. The battlefield is not where you think. While legacy media points to kinetic flashpoints, they are a strategic misdirection. The true staging ground for the next systemic shock is the gray zone, unstable regions chosen specifically for their regulatory vacuums and proximity to critical Western supply chains. Analysts at CSIS define these areas as proxy laboratories. A nation like South Africa, flagged for destabilization, is not the core threat. It is a symptom and a sandbox. It is where adversaries can test supply chain disruption tactics with plausible deniability, calibrating the precise level of shock needed to trigger a liquidity event in a G7 market. The mechanism is asymmetric leverage. The kinetic cost of sinking a U.S. aircraft carrier is astronomical. The cost of financing a protest that shuts down a critical cobalt mine for 3 weeks is negligible. Yet the latter poses a greater systemic threat to a financial system built on just-in-time delivery and zero inventory protocols. Central banks, fixated on traditional populism, are fighting the last war, as Alex Brummer notes. They are structurally blind to weaponized instability. This is not a failure of intelligence, it is a mathematical certainty. The overinvestment in conventional military assets, such as deploying an armada, source number 4, guarantees that any rational adversary will attack the undefended economic underbelly. This is a blueprint for triggering the Black Swan events, Business Insider warns of source number 2. The next vector will not be a naval blockade. Expect a coordinated, multi-front disruption of non-military infrastructure staged from these gray zones. The objective is not territory. It is to force a solvency crisis. The hype of war in venture capital, source number 1, is a distraction from the real economic theater of operations. The Nuclear Command Protocol, known as Launch on Warning, is a systemic liability from a bygone era. According to strategic frameworks analyzed by institutions like RUSI, the doctrine dictates that if early warning systems detect an incoming nuclear strike, retaliation must be launched before the incoming warheads can impact and destroy our own silos. It is a mathematical protocol designed to guarantee mutually assured destruction, removing human hesitation from the equation. This entire protocol is predicated on one assumption, that the data from the radar is real. An adversary understands this. The asymmetric vector is not a kinetic strike, but a cyber attack that blinds the system. This creates what CSIS analysts term the fog of digital war. The screens go black, or worse, they display fabricated launch signatures. In that moment, the commander is trapped by the protocol. Does he assume it's a cyber attack and risk the total annihilation of his nation if he's wrong? Or does he follow the doctrine and launch based on phantom data, triggering a global holocaust? The system is designed to force a launch. The adversary doesn't need to fire a missile. They only need to manipulate the ones and zeros that govern our most lethal asset. It is the ultimate leverage, forcing your enemy to defeat themselves at near zero kinetic cost. The overinvestment in kinetic assets, the reflexive dispatch of an armada as a signaling mechanism, is a terminal diagnosis. Reports from RUSI confirm this strategic liability. While our focus is on hardened military targets, the adversary's calculus is purely economic. They will not engage our strengths. They will attack the systemic fragility that central bank policies have engineered. The objective is not destruction, but the demonstration of leverage. A Black Swan event, as Business Insider terms it, need not be a random shock. It can be a manufactured vector. CSIS analysts warn the blueprint for this is an attack that generates maximum economic disruption with minimum kinetic cost and zero political attribution. This is the protocol of asymmetric warfare. The calibration shot will occur within the next 12 months. Expect a 48 to 72-hour logistics blackout at a critical U.S. port, likely Houston or Los Angeles. It will not be a power outage. It will be an IT systems failure, targeting the terminal operating system, paralyzing cargo manifests and crane operations. It will be publicly attributed to a non-state ransomware group, making direct retaliation impossible. The event is a mathematical certainty, designed to test our response protocols before a full-spectrum solvency attack.